Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Cherelle Blazer. I'm Senior Director of the International Climate and Policy Campaign at Sierra Club. And today we're going to be talking about our Grassroots Leaders Summit that is happening right now. It's in full swing. And I will turn it over to Sierra Club's president, Ramón Cruz, to give welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Cherelle. I believe everybody can hear me, right? All right. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm Ramón Cruz, and I'm president of the Sierra Club. As Cherelle said, I use pronouns he, him, his, and I'm speaking to you all from the unsurrendered land of the Canarsie people in the greater Lenape territory, known today as Brooklyn, New York. However, I'm originally from Boriquen, which is the Taino name of the island today known as Puerto Rico. So welcome everybody on behalf of the Sierra Club. I'm very excited that we're hosting a second Grassroots Climate Leader Summit this year. This week, grassroots leaders from over 40 organizations across 20 countries in the global south are convening, and we're doing so to raise demands ahead of COP26, and also to have some time to meet with U.S. COP negotiators about their issues and demands, about our issues and our demands. No, and it's critical that, especially during such important international climate negotiations, that we center and elevate and amplify local community voices and solutions. I recognize that from a distance, the COPs, this kind of meetings seem as bureaucratic and as wasteful of an effort to diffuse action on what is the most dangerous threat known to humanity, and that is center of a lot of our actions, right? So, but remember that COPs are also an opportunity to meet and get together. It enable us to strategize and to amplify the issues that we care about. Our voices together present a much bigger picture of our demands than we could do if we were all around our own corners in the world. So I know that many cannot participate in that space, but others will be able to do so. And I look forward to going there and to repeating the demands that we are discussed in this meeting with representatives of the U.S. negotiating team. I have been to many of these in the past, and I'm surprised how difficult it is. For example, when I go to Washington D.C. to meet with government representatives, it is a nightmare to get into the calendar of many officials when we demand to be heard. And therefore, last week, for example, I risked arrest in front of the White House in response to a call for solidarity of many indigenous leaders to stop the further development of dirty fuels infrastructure. However, during COP, I was amazed when I saw, at an event ahead of the Council for Environmental Quality, which is the main environmental advisor to the president of the United States, and that person was there, in the corner and even looking bored, and I approached this person and we had a great 15-minute conversation, something that would have been very difficult to achieve within the capital of the country. And so, it enables us ultimately to see the humanity of each other, and getting to know people sometimes can take us much further, and move forward the issues that we care so deeply about. So thank you to the many grassroots leaders around the world for all the work that you do, and for your participation in this summit. And we hope to continue to grow our collaboration and relationship in real, intentional solidarity, working together to fight climate change and for just transitions that center the voices and needs of the most marginalized. So my gratitude and solidarity to you all. Back to you, Cherelle.
I'm muted. Okay. Thank you, Ramon. Yes. Okay. So now we'll go through and have a quick round of introductions. I've already introduced myself. So I'm Cherelle Blazer. She, her pronouns, and I am showing up here from New Orleans, Louisiana. And I will pass it to Neha.
Thank you, Cherelle. Hi, everyone. I'm Neha Matthew Shah. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based in California in the United States, and I work with the Sierra Club's International Climate and Policy Campaign. Back to you, Cherelle.
Okay. I will pass it to Luisa.
Thank you, Cherelle. Hi, everyone. I'm Luisa Galvao, and I'm an international policy campaigner with Friends of the Earth US, usually based in Washington, D.C., temporarily in Mozambique. Thank you so much, and really happy to be here. Back to you, Cherelle.
Okay. And Omar, if you would like to go.
Thanks, Cherelle. Hi, everyone. The name is Omar Elmawi. I'm speaking to you today from Kenya, in Nairobi, in East Africa. I'm representing the Colonize campaign in Kenya that is trying to push against coal developments in the country. Back to you, Cherelle.
Okay. Can we hear from Vhon now, please?
Hi everyone, good evening from the Philippines. I am Vhon Tobes, a climate justice, food systems, and environmental activist from Catbalogan City, Philippines. I work as the director for Zero Hour Asia, and I have founded Zero Hour Philippines. Back to you, Cheryl.
Awesome. And then Krishna, round us out.
Nice to be here. I'm Krishnakant. I represent Friends of India, Friends of Earth India. Uh, we are many organizations representing various uh, places in India. Right now, I'm based in Gujarat. That is a province in India. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. And yes, any of you watching, if you want to type in where you're from in the chat, that would be great as well. And if you want to make comments, we will be taking questions and answering some of those comments at the end. Okay, so the first question I have for our colleagues in other countries is, what do you want the American public, American activists, policymakers, what do you want us to know about the most pressing climate issue in your country? Let's go with Vhon.
Hi. So I grew up experiencing multiple typhoons every year. Growing up, I have noticed how inconsistent raining was becoming. Then drought, thunderstorms, landslides, extreme heat that reaches 30 to 40 degrees. I grew up not only watching people cry as they watched their loved ones float on flood waters on TV, but actually experiencing it firsthand. I grew up not knowing what climate change is, or the reason why experiencing such things. I thought it's probably because we're sinners and that this is our punishment. At the age of 10, November 8, 2013, the first ever super typhoon recorded hit us, Eastern Visayas. It wasn't like any other typhoons we've experienced in the past. It was much stronger, scarier, traumatizing. I remember having all of my cousins and extended family stay in our house because the seawater was rising. The wind was blowing really hard. We could hear roofs flying and hitting houses. The next few months after that was a blur. We didn't have electricity for months. Groceries were almost empty. The eye of the storm hit the other side of our island. The only way we knew what was happening and what actually happened in the Tacloban city was because of my grandfather, who is a city engineer. They traveled to Tacloban with my mom and a few aunts and uncles. One thing I could not forget about how they described the city that took most of the damages was hundreds of bodies were everywhere. Most, if not all, trees were knocked down. There were no more houses in other parts, and the smell of death can be smelled inside the car even if they covered their mouths and noses with layers of clothes and hands. 2014 and the government helped us nowhere to be seen. Much of the reliefs were from other countries who are helping us. That's when we started smelling rage and anger lingering in the winds. Finally, electricity was back. First thing we saw on the news were politicians using the names of our dead fellow men in their speeches as if they were just names, applauding our resiliency and our bravery for surviving. Survivors are interviewed here and there while their stories are being exploited by politicians. But what about the stories of those who did not survive? All we ever wanted were help to be given and actions to be taken. I remember a few days before the 2014 Christmas, we were hit by another typhoon. We celebrated Christmas with no electricity, while some of our fellow Katbaloganans were celebrating Christmas with no roof over their head. The same thing happened in 2015. One typhoon hit before Christmas, and one typhoon hit before New Year. The next year, we were hit again, and the same in the next year, until I lost count of how many typhoons ravaged us or the names of the typhoons that traumatized us. The only names I remember are Yolanda, Ruby, and Ambo. In 2020, I joined the Climate Reality First Global Training online. First day of the training, opening presentation from Vice President Al Gore, and I cried. Out of all the cities and islands in the Philippines, I saw my city in his presentation. At the bottom of the picture, it says Catbalogan City, Philippines. It broke my heart seeing the picture of my city being ravaged by tidal waves. It broke my heart that the picture was taken a month before the training. Typhoon Ambo landed in my island. How different parts of summer were submerged under flood waters, brown, dirty flood waters. How a few months after that, five different typhoons, including the now two strongest typhoons recorded, Typhoon Rolly and Typhoon Ulysses, ravaged and shook the whole country in less than a month. From the last week of October to the first 2 weeks of November, I remember how I cried, stayed up for 3 straight days, helping and publicizing the hashtag RescuePH, checking who needs rescuing, sending free loads to volunteers, publicizing the horror because none of the biggest international media are talking about what was happening in the Philippines. None seemed to care. There are days I would just cry when those things cross my mind. My heart breaks for my people. My heart breaks for the people in the global south. My heart breaks for those living in the Pacific nations who had to fly to another country because their nation was sinking. For those who are in Tuvalu, for people in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, China, Hong Kong, Japan, and Korea. My heart breaks for those whose homes were burned in scorching fires. My heart breaks for those who had to lose their homes to rising sea levels, those who had to see their lifeless loved ones in the water, those who are burdened with the grief and trauma of surviving because leaders refuse to take actions. In more than 5 years since the world agreed to limit warming temperatures, banks have poured more than $3.6 trillion into fossil fuel, almost three times more than total bonds and loans backing green projects, according to Bloomberg data. Although renewable energy is growing rapidly around the world, fossil fuels still make up a majority of the world's energy use. In 2017, 81% of the energy the world consumed was oil, coal, and natural gas. Nearly 15 billion metric tons of fossil fuels are consumed every year. In 2021, fossil fuels supply about 80% of the energy we require. The remaining sources include nuclear power, biofuels, hydro, and other renewables such as solar, wind, and geothermal energy. These numbers don't seem to fit the 1.5 degrees limit set out in the Paris Agreement. According to scientists, at 1.5 degrees, global warming, climate-related risks to human health, livelihoods, food security, human security, water supply, and economic growth will all increase and will increase even more at 2 degrees warming. Our goals have always been to limit our emissions to stay below 1.5, but global leaders are turning a blind eye to the fact that we should be limiting ourselves to stay below 1 degree because 1.5 is already killing my people. While though climate change is a global issue, it's disproportionately affecting us vulnerable. When a typhoon or a storm hits us, it takes us years to stand up and be back on track. But it would take a lifetime or more to move on from the trauma every single cyclone causes us. While it takes days to weeks or a month to repair damages in countries like the United States, we cannot also ignore the fact that there are also Black and Brown communities in the United States that are being left behind after storms, climate disasters, and other natural phenomena. Climate change disproportionately affects indigenous peoples, people of color, women, and the global south. To all those who are watching and listening, especially those who are in the global north, to my fellow environmental activists in the global north, to the COP negotiators, to G7 and G20 nations, our works, grassroots leaders, indigenous activists, young people, people of color, and women are important in solving the climate crisis. Young people, our voices in this space are essential because we have inherited a crisis we had no hand in creating, a crisis that threatens our present and the future of our planet. We know what to do. Our scientists have been presenting us solutions for years. All we need to do is to open our ears, listen to them, and act in solidarity. Activists like us who are living in a country like the Philippines with second highest death rates of killed environmentalists, we're not only fighting for our planet. Every day we live in fear for our lives because yesterday it was our friends who were targeted by the government, but tomorrow it might be us. Highlight our stories, fund our works, give us space and platforms where we can amplify our work. Let us share our story and don't take away our story and voices away from us. We have our own voice for the people and the planet.
Thank you, Vhon. Whew, okay. I have all the feels, especially coming off of this hurricane season. There's a lot that we can be talking about and that we should be talking about together for sure. Next, I'd like to hear from Omar. Omar, I understand that you have somewhere else to be soon. So if you'd like to speak to both questions, what do you want the American public to know? And then also, what do you hope to get out of the COP negotiations? You can go ahead and do both.
Thanks, Cherelle. And while I enjoyed Vhon's statement, what he's read, he's definitely almost spoke on behalf of everyone here. And I definitely associate myself with everything that he said. So in terms of the first question, definitely when you look at Kenya and indeed Africa as a continent, climate change is affecting the continent quite significantly, despite us having very little to do with the emissions and the problems that we're in today. And in real sense, it's actually costing both lives and money. I mean, if you just do a quick Google search, you'll see the millions of people within Kenya and within Africa that are being affected from climate impact. Talk about floods, droughts, locust invasions, heat waves that are affecting millions and millions of people here in the continent. And the sad thing is that now it seems that Africa is out for scramble and partition as far as fossil fuel projects are concerned. I think it's the next frontier that all the fossil fuel companies are looking at to explore because of several reasons, but among them would be the fact that we don't have very good laws to protect us from the environmental and other impacts that will manifest once these projects they start to be they start taking through these projects. But also the second thing I would say is also that our governments are not as strong as some of the countries in the West and the East, and therefore they are quite susceptible to influence and being being made or someone to convince them to proceed with these projects, and therefore it becomes a big question mark. And therefore, for us, at least for where I'm coming from, I think it's going to be important for American activists as well as policymakers when you are planning in terms of climatic impacts or climatic decisions to make in terms of follow-up and making decisions. It will be important to think on the bigger picture and not just think of the US, because for a big part, the global north has been quite responsible to the mess that you are in today. And therefore, it will be important to start thinking on alternatives and definitely how best we can escalate this in a more global way, and even to do it in a way that the African continent and indeed the rest of the world is benefiting from the process. In terms of the second question that you asked as to what we are hoping to get out from the US COP negotiators, I think for us it's going to be fundamental that they first acknowledge that the US and several other countries in the West and in the East have been responsible. I mean, if you're talking about carbon emissions and climate change and those who are responsible for it, we're talking about a handful of countries. And therefore, it will be important for these countries to first acknowledge that they've taken us to the problem that we are in today, and therefore it behooves them to come up with solutions that are also figuring out a way of supporting Africans and especially the global South towards leaping from fossil fuels into just renewable energy. And while doing that, it's definitely therefore going to be important to come up with funding alternatives and not financing or debt, because they're making us whole in terms of not having explored fossil fuels when they did. And I would also say it's going to be important to figure out a way of having technological transfer to the continent and to the global South, because and we've seen this happening a lot on the renewable energy platform as well, where big companies are coming in, exploiting raw materials from Africa and the global South, and then taking them to their countries and manufacturing them and then bringing them back here. And therefore, we are also being affected by some of these projects. And therefore, it's going to be important for them to, when coming up with the solutions, to make sure that they do not take advantage of the global South. And finally, what I would want to say in closing is the fact that this is our country, not our country, but our planet, and all of us have to live in it. And the principles of equity and equality are definitely important, but also the principles of the polluter pays is also key. And therefore, while coming up with the solutions, please also understand that it's important to reach out to the grassroots communities and not just speak with the governments, because that's something that we've seen happening a lot. And what's important and why I'm raising this is that one, the communities and the grassroots are experts in their own right about the issues that are affecting them within where they're coming from. Not every time, although most of the time, that the government is actually having the best interest of the community and the grassroots at heart. And therefore, to be able to make sure that we do not see this escalating, it's going to be important to check with the communities. Definitely the fact that the government is not, they're not rulers, but our representatives. And therefore, for us to uphold that principle, it's going to be important to know what the grassroots want so that they can represent us in terms of what's best for the grassroots communities. The last thing that I will say is the part of the reason why we're here is we thought we could keep on doing the same things and expecting a different results. And definitely that's the definition of insanity. And therefore, if we want to make a change, then we have to come up with solutions and ways that are a little bit different, that are really taking into consideration what we've done wrong, so that they bring these important voices into this discussion, which is the grassroots community leaders who are experts in their own rights, who know what is best for them, and therefore an agenda without their total buy-in is definitely deemed to fail. Back to you, Cherelle.
Thank you, Omar. Okay, and then now we will hear from Krishna. What is it that you want the American public and decision makers to know about the most pressing environmental issues and climate issues in your country? Krishna, can you hear us?
Yeah,
Okay, can we unmute Krishna, please? Sorry, we're having a technical difficulty, Krishna. You're still muted.
I'm trying to unmute.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. Okay. So you're still muted right now.
Yeah, I don't
There.
know. It automatically gets muted.
There.
Anyway,
Oh, okay.
now I think I'm audible. Thank you. So see, there is a need for alliances uh, within citizens. The states, the governments, they have their own politics, and we have seen that because of that politics, after so many COPs and so many commitments that we have after every meetings, we have seen the states backtracking on what they had committed. But it is the citizens who bear the wrath of the climate changes that are happening. And basically, it is the poor and the marginalized. And India, being a country with a huge population, with a huge diversity of geographical diversity, we have so many people who would be adversely impacted if things do not fall in the right way. So we feel that it is important citizens take up this initiative, and we have to voice ourselves. Most of the countries which are slated to be affected most adversely are the countries from Asian region, and India has a coast, and we have so many studies which says that any change in the sea level would impact millions of population in India. It is not only the sea level that would impact, but it is also the rising temperature, where the poor farmers, forest dwellers, Adivasis, Dalits, who work in open for a meager earning to support their lives and livelihoods, they would be forced to work in an inaccessible climate where people don't even dare to go out in an open sun. So it will be a difficult situation where India would be very much impacted. Few things that I would like to say, that even though we are finding such vulnerabilities where we would be impacted in a much larger scale, but we also see at the same time that in the name of development, there are projects and policies being pushed which push people towards more energy intensive lifestyles. And energy is a major issue where we are talking of phasing out coal energy and bringing renewables. But an impact that can be created in a very short time frame can only be brought by controlling our energy intensive lifestyles, which unfortunately the international monetary agencies are pushing otherwise, be it in the form of urbanization, be it in the form of industrialization. In many other ways, we see that energy intensive lifestyles are the main push for more and more power generation. Also, urbanization pushes for need for transportations, and there is very little investment in terms of public transportation. People are encouraged and incentivized to go for private transportation in terms of two-wheelers, in terms of four-wheelers, and in many other ways that the automobile industry is pushing. So that creates an pressure on the petroleum products which are demanded in a very large scale. So on one hand, we have a challenge inside India where we are negotiating, we are pushing, we are advocating with our very own government to not only adhere to the international commitments that our government has made, we are also fighting within the country that whatever climate justice initiatives are taken in India, they are implemented to their fullest. They are not just implemented in terms of words, but also in terms of deeds and in terms of deliverables that were expected. Unfortunately, what we find is there are projects being proposed, but they don't deliver. That is a big issue. So delivery from our very own government is one of our focus, but also delivery of and also alliances among the citizens of various countries, compulsions of various governments is needed. That is what we would like to underline. With this, thank you.
Thank you, Krishna. Okay, so we are not just telling stories from parts of the country. Everyone on here is a leader in their own right. They are all experts, environmental experts in their own countries. And not only do we want to uplift what's happening in those countries, but we also want to understand how we can be working together to help each other in this struggle against the climate crisis, and what's the most actionable things that we can be doing here in the US, right? What are the most actionable things that we as US citizens can be doing to make sure that all of our boats are rising, to make sure that all of that we're coordinating with our colleagues around the world to tackle the climate crisis. And with that, I want to turn it over to first Luisa from Friends of the Earth US, and then Neha with Sierra Club to speak about the US perspective and what we're doing to work together.
Thank you so much, Cherelle, and thank you so much to all of our colleagues who spoke so powerfully as well. It's really an honor to be here with you. So, I mean, just a quick word. you know, as Omar was saying, the United States is the largest historic contributor to climate change. And that gives the US significant responsibility to not only reduce its emissions at home and stop being part of the problem, leading to so many of the impacts that Vhon and Krishnakant also spoke about, but that also gives the US significant responsibility to pay a historic debt to countries that did little to nothing to cause climate change and are facing its impacts most acutely, as well as to help them transition to community-centered renewable energy. And this historical responsibility, you know, the climate action that is born of this, it shouldn't be top-down, or we're just going to recreate the unjust processes of the past. So I think this summit is so important because the people who the US should be the most accountable to as it takes climate action are those people and communities that are being directly affected by the impacts of climate change and who are also being affected by harmful fossil fuel energy and the continued drivers of climate change. These are the people on the front lines of the impacts, fighting both the drivers and the impacts of climate change in very vulnerable countries around the world. They are the true climate leaders, and they know better than anyone what the impacts of climate change are, what the impacts of dirty energy are, and the specificities of what their communities and their countries need to meet energy needs and to develop in a way that is just and inclusive. And they need to have a seat at the decision-making table. And that's why it's so important that we hear from them and that US leaders hear from them and or other global North decision makers hear from them. And I'm really happy to be here in this summit, but it shouldn't require summits like these for these decision makers to hear from these groups and leaders. It should become a part of their practice, how they hold consultations, who they are consulting. It's a matter of justice. So I think an outcome of this summit that would be really, great is to make clear to all, and especially to those in positions of power, who the real climate leaders are, and to establish this practice of centering their voices in any of these conversations about what climate action should look like and what a sustainable and inclusive and community-centered, resilient and prosperous future should look like. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Neha.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, I know I'm having trouble with my microphone today, so just interrupt if you lose me. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, as Luisa said, to especially our grassroots participants that spoke today, and also to all of the grassroots leaders who are participating as a part of this summit and constantly doing this work around climate, not because it's part of a job or something that you have to do, but it's something that is just a part of who you are and part of your community. As someone who identifies as a South Asian American, originally from India, I am constantly in the US aware of the issues happening right here in my backyard, whether it's intense wildfires and how those are impacting our community, industrialization that's happening here in the US, the impacts of hurricanes that are affecting particularly my friends and people I know in the Gulf in the United States. And of course, all of these impacts that we heard from some of our speakers here, particularly in South Asia and across Asia. We are in a time when we have inequitable access to COVID-19 vaccines and healthcare. There are travel restrictions and huge barriers to participation, particularly for Black and Brown people and people from the global South in participating, especially in big international climate negotiations like the COP26 summit happening in Glasgow. We organized this grassroots summit to provide an opportunity for grassroots leaders around the world to meet each other, raise their issues ahead of these summits, and to put forward their demands to the negotiators who will be at COP on behalf of the United States. We will be posting here an action that we have put out online. And if you're based in the US and you care about these issues and you want to know more, I really encourage you to take action. We are calling on US climate negotiators to center grassroots voices and demands and to immediately stop the flow of financing destructive fossil fuel projects across the globe, especially from the US Export-Import Bank and the US International Development Finance Corporation. We're calling to greatly increase investments in renewable energy projects, particularly in developing countries, and increase community access to affordable clean energy. We're also asking on prioritizing distributed renewables, as they're more likely to provide affordable access to electricity for poor rural communities that are most in need. We're asking to develop a financial framework and just transition guidelines, especially as we retire coal plants around the world. And we're asking ensure that coal is replaced with renewable energy, not gas. During this summit, we're hearing particularly from local community leaders talking about how gas and gas plants are not a transition fuel. As Omar said earlier, we truly encourage government leaders listen to people on the ground about their impacts, not just governments around the world, and greatly increase the financial commitments of wealthy nations like the US to ensure that the countries most impacted by climate change are able to adapt and respond. Again, we've shared the link to this petition. Please do take action. Thank you.
Thank you, Neha. Okay, so we have a few minutes left, and I'm not seeing any questions in the chat for our panelists, but if you're watching and you have any questions for anyone here before we close out, please do type it, and we will do that. In the absence of any question, we can just have dialogue here about the upcoming COP and the negotiations that are going to be happening. I know that myself and Ramón will be there, and we'll be taking all of the demands that have been collected from this group and amplifying them and lifting them up so that negotiators can know what those are, and then we can also hold them accountable on what comes forward. Is there anything in particular that you're hoping to see the United States move forward on? I know that we've talked about, funding of renewables and I would call it reparations, right, for past climate harms that the U.S. has participated in and is still participating in. But is there anything else that we need to move forward on and make progress on?
If I may, I can jump in. I think other than the commitments that developed countries that created this problem now and this urgency should do, they should also be models to follow and put their examples. And so right now in the U.S. It is very disappointing that we're only a few weeks away, and that there's actually no plan that is ambitious enough for the U.S. to justify being leaders in the world to go forward with the goals of the Paris Agreement. So we're doing everything we can in the U.S. to take us there, for Congress to make a commitment, but of course that it's still on the workings. So
Thank you for naming that, Ramon. Very important, and it's hanging in the balance right now, the new infrastructure plan and bill. Krishna, would you like to go next? I saw you come off mute. Krishna, did you want to speak? You're off mute.
Yes, like he very well he said that you are all pushing for more commitments from US. But what I think important are two things. One is, as I said earlier, it is important that these commitments are adhered to. They are actually no. I think am I audible? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. The commitments that are made, they have to be actually what should I say? They don't remain on paper or only on words. They have to be delivered. The second thing is that energy intensive
Okay, you just muted when you said the second thing. Krishna, we can't hear you. You're muted. Yes, we hear you now. You're good.
Yeah, I think I finished, but I'll repeat the second thing that I said. Second thing that I said is more energy efficient technologies have to be pushed because it is the energy demands that are pushing more on the crisis that we have created in terms of climate change. So energy, basically energy at all levels have to be addressed, including efficient lifestyle and including other ways where we use various forms of energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna. Okay, and I think we have to say goodbye to Omar. Thank you for being on with us, Omar. Let's see you in the other meetings. Okay, Vhon, did you have a response?
I'm done.
Yes, Vhon, would you like to speak?
I would also like to highlight how climate education is needed for people in the global south. And I think the United States can um, work on creating resources for us in the global south to better understand climate change easily as a reparation. Because, like what I have said earlier, I didn't know what climate change was. And one thing I thought that it was that we were sinners and that it was a punishment for us. So I think climate education and is really important, and that there should be resources available, especially since a lot of grassroots communities here in the Philippines don't have access to internet to easily research what climate change is and the important information about climate change is. So one thing to do by the United States is to make resources for us to understand climate change and related information.
Thank you, Vhon. Okay, we have a question in the chat from Ben Clark. With the current stalemate on climate legislation, what would you recommend for grassroots organizers to do to demand as we organize for the global strike this Friday? You can just take yourself off mute if you want.
Anybody did? Should I take this or anybody
Go
else?
ahead.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think in the next 2 weeks, organize as much as possible. Somebody in the Carol mentioned in cinema. Of course, a lot of the pressure is on Manchin right now. It's just incredible to believe that one person can hold the whole world hostage to just coal interests, and it's infuriating, because it is a really a fault or a glitch in the democratic system here in the United States that it's just infuriating and so dysfunctional. No, however, it is what we are working in right now. So actually, pressure to them, but also it's important that all Congress members and senators hear from constituencies, because they are, as we are speaking here right now, they're actually actively negotiating in this very hour. So, and that will probably continue until there is a major framework, at least to present going towards Glasgow, and that it may not happen up to the very last minute. So keeping the pressure up is very important. The other thing is actually maintaining, even from a distance, this COP will be much more virtual than regular COPs. So actually maintaining the connection and commenting and letting your own governments know that you're watching. It is possible to ask for all documentation for all the positions of the countries. You should actually revise those. See who are the point persons of the from your own countries to the COPs. Usually it's either the ministries of environment or the ministries of foreign affairs. So they should have, if the communications within your country are not visible enough and you're not able to access that, you can access it actually through the United Nations framework conventions on climate change, because all of that is public information. So while in your countries you may not access everything, you can do it, and certainly through networks within there. We'll try to provide as much help as possible, but also through the Climate Action Network, CAN International. There are different ways to stay connected and to know what your countries are actually saying within the summit, so within the COP itself.
And can I just add something, Cherelle?
Yes, please.
Yeah, just to build on what Ramón was saying. And, I think my comment will just be broader, and to say we should not limit our demands on the political reality. We have to set the bar for what is needed and keep that bar there. And that's my only comment. And, yes, we lack political will in a lot of ways, and there are a lot of barriers, but I think, as a global community, we have to keep setting the bar high and not wavering on our demands for the countries that contributed the most to climate change to do their fair share, and to support countries on a just transition. So I would just share that encouragement with everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Luisa. Okay, I think we have 3 minutes left. If you have anything else that you want to close with, please do so quickly. Yes, Krishna. Go ahead.
Yeah, see, I would also like to warn here that in the name of clean energy, nuclear energy is also being promoted, which is equally dangerous not only in terms of climate, but also it leads to war and it encourages the tendency of war. So we have to be also wary of what we push when we say we don't want coal or carbon emitting energies. So we also have to be aware and vigilant on what is being pushed instead of the coal. Thank you.
Excellent point. Yes, very true. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone who watched this. Please share it on your social media. If there's someone else you think that would be interested in these topics and supporting, please share it with them. And yes, the rest of the summit is going to be continuing this week. We have tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to have another public-facing webinar where we hear from more of the participants from other countries and continue to talk about these important issues. You can find out how you can get involved with them. You can connect with them one-on-one. And yeah, we can continue to collaborate and work together to tackle this climate crisis. Thank you, everyone.